What is up, Scrub fam? I am back with another video. This is another regional breakdown. We just had St. Louis happen over the weekend, and it was a fun regional. We had commentary and everything hosted by DBS Decks that were there at the event, that did live commentary and streaming for the event itself, and constantly had the camera on, which is pretty cool because we got to hear them speak about the majority of the time without having too many breaks in between, which was nice. And the tournament seemed to be ran smoothly because it ended up being pretty quick. I wasn't there, but from judging from watching the stream as well as how fast the event ran, since I watched the coverage all day, I imagine that it was pretty great. So in general, before I get into the breakdown, let me go ahead and do the usual. Shout out to my sponsor, Alec Pastrana, Beard Collectibles, best shop owner on the planet. If you're looking to buy your Shield product for the World's Martial Arts Tournament, get it through Alec Pastrana. Also, if you're looking at your 3XG Productions t-shirts, go through Bearded Collectibles to the apparel section. And then lastly, if you're looking to get daily articles, access to additional content, and truly up your game, I just finished some playtesting sessions with some patrons today. It was pretty amazing. Please check out the Patreon if you get a chance. I'll put links in the description below. So, without any further ado, enough with all the plugs. We can talk about the event this weekend. So, the event was great because there was a lot of things that we saw on camera. There's a lot of stuff that we didn't see, and there's some things that we're still left wondering until the deck list comes out to see what finished within the top 23 people got invites. So I wonder if they're just going to go ahead and release the top 32 deck lists for the event. That's where we're going to be able to take most of our data from, which is where we need to get the data from to see if everything truly is the way it appeared to be on camera, with having a SS3 mirror in the finals. I meant last round, so I have an SS3 mirror in the last round, and just seeing what the rest of the tables were, I'd be interested to see where, the boogeyman of the format, blue, yellow, Hurrigan finished up, and in general, see how many slots that it took in the top 32. But in general, we can go ahead and dive into the breakdown. We can start with what I usually start with, the winner. And the winner this week was Innovation. So we had two things that you could do this week. You could either follow the machine, or you can be an innovator, do something different, or use some new tech, or just change the way that you want to play the game, or change your deck list. And a lot of people took the rules of engagement that this format provided to them, which was essentially fighting in the phone booth, as I've talked about on my Patreon, and people have talked to me in conversation about the way this format works, and basically trying to live with that in that limited energy constraint that you get against Blue Yellow Hurrigan, but then finding a way to expand it. And so whether if it's playing defensively using the different tech cards like Flying Nimbus, Sensubine, etc., you're just able to take the game, expand it, and then find a way to close it out. And so you saw a lot of innovation on camera. You saw a lot of people playing, some sweet tech this weekend, and that ended up winning the weekend out over Blue Yellow Hurrigan. But I mean, that's one thing to be said. So I think that innovating is amazing, because when we get to the format check, you're going to be able to see that the format it's not like a drastic change, but you'll start to see that now there are more defined levels than there were before. Because, the last regional breakdown we did, which was for core TCG, level 1 was basically just like Blue Yellow Hurrigan, and the rest was pretty much unknown at that point, because that deck came out to be like a tier 0 deck because it didn't have targets on its back yet. But now, with a target on its back, and everybody getting a full entire week for brewing, testing, coming up with a different deck list, coming up with playing stuff like Powers Combined Kibito Kai in the main deck, Group Leader Pilaf in the main deck, like all these things and different lines of play and strategies to be able to extend the game, or just take away some of the, or not necessarily take away the effectiveness of the blue yellow deck, but really just like put some speed bumps in there. They got it to a position where it didn't want to be in, which is honestly where it's at the third and fourth turn when it gets dragged into the deep waters. I mean, think of it almost like an MMA fight or a boxing round. If you're a really good fighter and you're facing an opponent that is coming out and trying to knock you out, you need to try and extend the fights to the later rounds to be able to gas them out, and that's usually what ends up happening against Blue Yellow Hurrigan. So it was good to see that. Another good thing to see was a lot of the SS3 decks adapted to Force Ejection Mass being in the format, whether it be changing the strategy, or whether it be playing Supreme West Kai, which I thought was pretty cool. Just whatever they could do to kind of get some sort of advantage with their energy, as opposed to just being left to die against Force Ejection Mass. But additionally, it was another week where you saw that Force Ejection Mass was kind of pushed out because Vegeta Tax's decks were basically cannibalized by the Blue Yellow Hurrigan decks. Because if you're going to play a Blue Yellow strategy, why not play the one that's just the best, right? And so you saw that. And then, of course, in our finals and throughout the event, you saw Blue Yellow SS3, which is essentially using the same engine as Blue Yellow Storm, but it's allowed to play with different defensive capabilities, and that deck ended up being the deck that took the weekend. Ben Lodice, I think his name, or Lodice, I don't know how you pronounce it, but he won the event itself. He finished, first in Swiss, so I'll have to reach out to him and try and get him on for a Winner's Edge episode this week. So if you're watching this, reach out to me, or I'll reach out to you, whatever. But let me know if you're interested. And we'll do our Winner's Edge episode to basically go over the deck itself, why they made the decision to play what they play, and all the little nuances to the deck too. But in general, the winner this week was Innovation. The loser this week, the opposite of Innovation, loser this week was the Machine. So the Machine, essentially what that means is, I don't know if you're familiar with terms coming from other card games, but what I like to think of as the Machine is basically what happens when a deck breaks out. It happened the same thing at the Magic Pro Tour recently. It happens in other card games all the time. Is that basically this one deck will break out, and then now everyone will jump to that deck or pick up that deck. And the thing about regional season that makes it so cool is that all the events are like stacked on top of each other, so it's like week after week after week. So you can see how the format shifts and like flows throughout the entire regional season, which is super exciting. So you can see how many people really jump onto the Machine, and there was a lot of people that did. And so with that happening, you were able to see that there was a lot of people that pick up this deck, and if you watch the camera matches, there were a lot of people that didn't necessarily do well with their sequencing. They didn't think about the things that were now in the format, and so they were all thinking about last week's results, and they were thinking about last week's play style and the way the deck looked last week and the way it played its games last week, and they weren't thinking about this week. They weren't thinking about the tech that people would play this week. And that was the first thing after Chris Welch won Core TCG. We got in the chat, we started talking about different things we could do to stop this deck, and we just started like throwing out things. We were just like, how could you play around Full Power Energy? We were like, Group Leader Peel-Off is going to be a thing. We started talking about how stuff like Shining Blaster with Bergamo, Kakade Zone, like all these things you have to start thinking about playing against, because all these things are good against us, or good against this deck in general. So it's like these little speed bumps, these roadblocks can get in the way. I mean, even Richard Zapp brought up Time Kicker, and Pat O'Neill was bringing up things, and just, again, so everyone that had jumped onto the stack or jumped on into the onto the Machine for this week ended up suffering some setbacks because they weren't necessarily prepared. They just jumped to the deck that was declared the best, and then they ended up not having such a great weekend. There were a lot of people that still finished strong, and that's why I said I'm really excited to see what the top 32 deck lists were, or the top 23, however they want to put them out there, because of the way the tournament was set up. But I'd be really interested to see how many of the top 32 ended up being blue-yellow Hoover Return still, because I think the deck is still incredibly overpowered and powerful. So, in general, loser this week was the Machine. Next topic. This happened a few times on camera and resulted in double game losses and game losses in general, but essentially the irreparable game states that took place, and which I think is funny because, number one, ARG has made it so you're allowed to use the stream to fix instances like this, right? So, I mean, that's not every game's rule, but ARG is using it as that. And so the fact that you have a camera match, but not only do you have a camera match, but it's like, again, how involved are the judges in these games to make sure these games are as clean as possible? Because the amount of times there was, something improperly comboed, like we had with the Desperate Onslaught Bardock, where the player swung, and then only one turn goes by, right? So the player swings with Desperate Onslaught Bardock, and then his opponent combos with a Boo on board when he's not allowed to do that. And so that ends up going to the drop area, and then he draws for turn. And then so now the game state, they're declaring it irreparable, like you can't go back, and it's like, no, we could easily go back and use the resources because this has already been something that's been set precedent, that you can use the camera to repair game states. And so both players ended up getting a double game loss, and then they have to roll dice and go to game 3, which didn't feel necessarily good from a player experience-wise. But I think this is just something to be mindful of when you're playing in a tournament, is making sure that you are, number one, you know exactly what your cards do, and you just make sure that whether if you have to make declamatory statements towards your opponent, to make sure they know exactly what it does when you do it. So, for instance, you play Desperate Onslaught Bardock, and you swing, you need to make sure that you're going, okay, I'm going to swing Desperate Onslaught Bardock, basically nullifies blocker, and you're not able to combo from board. And it's like, I know that we don't think to do these things, but as players, we need to make sure that we are announcing to our opponent, because the way that it is deemed by this game is that both players are responsible for maintaining the game state. So you should know that as the pilot of your deck, that if your opponent fails, to do something and you both accept a broken game state, that you both have to be prepared for a double game loss. And one thing that's kind of messed up about it too is that setting this precedence with basically giving players game losses on camera for these things, like, you're basically taking these camera matches and you're putting them above every type of match, because not every game that happens in a given tournament is going to have the same level of detail where, like, Twitch chat comes and says there was a mistake and the mistake was like a turn later, and then they go and then let them know, hey, you guys messed up, and then now it's an irreparable game state. Like, on the floor, that's not going to happen, because judges, there's not a judge per match, there's not a Twitch chat, there's not a camera, and so there's plenty of irreparable game states that are happening across the course of the floor, but only the people that are being held accountable for it are the people that are on stream, which, I get it, you have to use the stream and your best resources to make sure that you can play the best game as possible because you want to present it that way, but I think you should then consider using the resources you have, then make sure that it is completely clean. So make sure you can say, hey, stop, let's go back, let's rewind, and let's do this right, as opposed to, what happened on there in general. But I think overall throughout the day, the judges were on top of everything. The event, I didn't hear any complaints about anything at all. The only thing was just like seeing the irreparable game states on camera was just kind of off-putting, because it was just like, I know that it's just not a good experience for anybody involved, whether it be the players, the judges, Twitch chat, the commentators, like, because then that becomes the topic of conversation. So in general, if you're going to a tournament, you're playing your deck, make sure you remember that you and your opponent are both responsible for the game state itself, and make sure you both maintain it through constant communication. Anyway, enough of my soapbox about irreparable game states. The MVP! Unyielding Spirit Trunks, the card that single-handedly proves that the legendary flute was never the problem. It's never been the problem. It's not an issue. Legendary flute, I get it. We're going to reduce it from 4 to 1. If you go watch my video on YouTube that I posted as Blue, Yellow, Hooter, and I played against Pan, I won on turn 2 with, I think I maybe played one flute. Maybe played a single flute. I don't even think I did. It wasn't necessary. I mean, and even if I played 2, it's like you can see that, like, the card is important, but the card that was most important outside of Sensu Bean, which I think is a fair card because everyone has access to, and it's like it's not restricted like Unyielding Spirit Trunks is, and Unyielding Spirit Trunks is just for blue leaders, is this generates free energy. And right now when you have something like Bardock and Sun Goten, what makes it so degenerate is the fact that you get 2 attacks per 1 energy, and every single time you can use an Unyielding Spirit Trunks or a Sensu Bean, you're now adding 2 more attacks on top of that. So it just keeps stacking across the course of the turn, and so your storm count just keeps getting higher and higher. Hope everyone's triggered right now by that, but in general your storm count's higher and higher. Camera confirmed, commentator confirmed, they called it storm. Throwing that out there. Name debate. It's a point in my favor. Otherwise, it's still the deck formerly known as Storm 1 through swaps, in my opinion. But in general, Unyielding Spirit Trunks was the MVP of the day. You even saw it happen when one of the players played against the mono-blue SS3 deck, and they got P-Loft, so they swung, got P-Loft. They were just like, okay, I'll swing leader on Unyielding Spirit Trunks, I'll untap my yellow, I'll flute my Bardock back to hand, and then I'll replay my Bardock, and then start this chain all over again. Like, Unyielding Spirit Trunks it's too strong of a card because it just stacks so well with Sensu Bean. It's only restricted to blue leaders, and so blue leaders now are the only thing that have free energy that can't be interacted with. Whereas, like, Shigesh got a card like Cronoa. So maybe unless in this set or coming sets we're going to see something that comes into play and says, like, your opponent can't use effects to untap their energy during the combo step or something, like, or can't use battle cards to untap their energy during the combo step. Like, that way Sensu Bean still works, but this card no longer works. In general, I still think this card is an issue, but this was the MVP of the weekend. This did the most work, and it showed, especially in the finals and later rounds. This is also great in any of the Goku decks that are trying to go lower to the ground, especially like the red-blue decks, if they wanted to be able to get an Unyielding Spirit, Intensifying Power Trunks involved into a Chain Attack Trunks and the same exact turn into a Zeno. This was a card that kind of unlocked that for you, but overall, this is the card that was the MVP, did the most heavy lifting aside from Scrambling Assault Sun Goten across the course of the weekend. So in general, be on the lookout for this card. Learn how to play around this card. This is one thing that in testing in general, like, you have to keep your opponent off of yellow energy if you're playing against the blue-yellow storm decks, and so the best way to do that is by utilizing your negates within, like, some sort of pattern or rhythm, and you want to make sure that you're doing it when you know that they have to combo to be able to keep their turn going. So if you get them to the point where at their last attack and they've sequenced their turn wrong, which I saw a lot of this on camera, a lot of this happened over this weekend because people are inexperienced with the deck, but they'd swing, and then it'd be their last attack, it'd get negated, and then now they're stranded. Like, they can't do anything for their turn, now they don't have a yellow up to defend themselves, and so the player now gets priority, and they get another turn. So, again, Keep that in mind. And that's one thing about when you're playing those blue-yellow storm decks, or deck formerly known as Storm 1-2 swaps decks, is that when you're playing that deck, you need to make sure that you're keeping your yellow open at all times. And so when you're playing that deck, it's usually best to play your Bardock, swing with your Bardock first, then unyielding, then swap if you need to. But in general, I really like just keeping the train going with using Bardock as much as possible for the Goten, as Chris Welch talked about in his video when we did the Winning Edge together. But in general, this was the MVP card. Keep practicing with blue-yellow Hurrigan. I still think it's a very powerful deck, still probably the best deck in the format. But this card, again, proved its worth this weekend and proved why Legendary Flute was never the problem. O'Neal Spirit Trunks is the problem. But Bandai, you got this. I believe in you. I believe in you. You'll get it right. I knew you will. For a fact. Kidding. I don't know. It saddens me. Tech of the weekend! My guy, playing Mono Blue SS3, played all three cards in his deck. All three of these cards in his deck. And I don't necessarily think that other people didn't play these cards, but his deck showed it off on camera the most. He sided in West Supreme Kais, he sided in Group Leader Beloff, and he had SSB Vegito. And so the way that you have to beat these blue-yellow Hurrigan decks, if you're playing something like SS3 and you're playing blue, you have to get to 4 energy, you have to turn a Vegito sideways, and you just have to play Protect the Queen. So you just protect Vegito and just make sure nothing else happens, and then you'll just win the game because they will gas out. They will run out of cards. They won't be able to do anything. They'll run out of defense mechanisms. Like, you can, again, stifle them on their energy if you time your negates well. But in general, Group Leader Peel Off to get rid of Swap. You had Supreme West Kai to allow you to ramp to your 4-drop earlier, and then just in general help you play around Force Ejection Mass Saiyan. And then you had Awe-Inspiring Intimidator SSB Vegito. This card was the stones all day whenever it was in play. I've been testing all weekend with blue-yellow control, and this card is just this is the cornerstone of the deck. You know, this is the cornerstone of SS3 decks going forward, as we start playing this aggressive format. And so that's why, you know, the format again shifts, and we add different levels to the format, as you'll see on the next slide. But in general, the Mono Blue SS3 deck was full of spice. I thought that it was one of the best built decks over the weekend, and it was cool. He did an interview after one of his rounds, and he was just honest. He was just like, I have like a 70% win rate against Blue Yellow Hurrigan. He's like, but if I play against like any other color SS3, like, I get dumpstered. Like, he was honest, and that was cool. And so now we all get to kind of just like wait for his deck list to come out, take it apart, and then just like dissect what we want to keep, what we want to move forward, what we want to put into different colors, what we want to do to like improve the matchups. And then so now we'll just like tweak, and then now the machine will start running with that deck, as you'll see. I mean, you're going to see Mono Blue decks across Octagon over the course of the next week, because they're going to be testing it once the list gets published. But in general, this was the tech of the weekend. This was probably one of the coolest decks. And then additionally, you know, you saw Cell and androids, like you saw Cell Chain with androids, and then you saw just the blue-yellow decks. You saw them playing Mirror Creator, Absorbed in the Mirror with Battering Laser and Further Instruction Champa to win games. You saw Desperate Onslaught Bardock getting past blockers. You saw Mass Saiyan, the Mysterious Warrior, make a return to the fray. There was a lot of tech across this weekend, and so if you haven't got a chance to go back and watch coverage, you need to check out DBS Decks on Twitch. I'll go ahead and put the link down to their stream in the description, so you can go ahead and check that out and watch it on demand. And I recommend watching as many rounds as possible. The only round that I would say wasn't that impactful, but it was a fun set of games to watch, aside from issue with irreparable game state that was created in part by the judge, but it was really the player's responsibility to know that their card was in rest mode. But it was Apes versus Baby. That match isn't necessarily impactful in the metagame, but it's just a really fun match to watch in general. But across the course of the day, you saw a lot of really powerful decks on camera, and that'll kind of help you get a feel for the format and what decks and what tech to take into this next week. And so lastly, we have the format level check. So there's more levels now, and this is a really good thing because this weekend just happened. But in general, I still think that Blue-Yellow Storm, or Blue-Yellow, the deck formerly known as Storm 1-2 swaps, is still the best deck in the format. I still think that the piloting matters, the sequencing matters, and someone who walks into your room and is the best with this deck is going to be the person that wins a lot of tournaments or wins a lot of rounds or gets their invite the most frequently. You're going to be able to have the best win percentage, and so I'd really like to start tracking the win percentages of these Blue-Yellow Storm decks, but unfortunately we just don't have that data yet. In general, though, I still think that's the best deck of the format. Number 2, so the format, the level that goes over that, so one that's going to be keeping that in check, is Blue and Blue-Yellow Control. So blue is like mono blue with like Bergamo and Vegito, and you saw peel off, like all those things. And blue yellow control is essentially using similar engine, but you're using Flying Nimbus, you're using some Crusher Balls, and you're using a lot of these cards that stifle the opponent's turn, and you just kind of get to play a really controlled game. And then again, you're just trying to stick a Vegito, but then now you get a cool threat like Belmod, or you can play at all cost Vegeta plus Battering. Like, this deck is really good. It's not played, people aren't talking about it, but blue yellow control is a deck in the metagame. Just it wasn't really on camera this weekend, and no one really played it this weekend because it's still an archetype that's yet to be fleshed out. But in general, I still think that and blue have a great win percentage against blue yellow, the deck formerly known as Storm 1/2 swaps. 3, the deck that goes over top of those decks is blue-red SS3 midrange, and so like for seeing hit, chain attack, Zeno, that's going to go over top of the blue and blue-yellow decks, the control decks. So in general, that's how the format then shakes up there. So you have blue-yellow, the deck formerly known as Storm 1/2 swaps, gets countered by blue and blue yellow control. Then blue and blue yellow control gets countered by blue red SS3 midrange. And then those decks, so blue red SS3 midrange and blue yellow control, gets countered by Cell Chain, so androids. And then blue red Hirudegarn, our old friend, Flute Aggro, blue red Flute Aggro, is back in the format, and gosh, he is ready. I got a list right now that is super spicy, winning games on turn 2, has a good matchup in game 1 and game 2 against blue-yellow Storm. I mean, blue-yellow, the deck formerly known as Storm, 1/2 swaps. And I'm excited to see where the format shakes up from here. I'm going to be doing more testing this week. I did a ton of testing this weekend to continue getting the list right, the ratios right. I did testing with patrons. Like, it's been an awesome weekend for Dragon Ball, and I'm excited for the next regional, which is coming up, which I think is in Canada, which is coming up on the 1st. So be watching coverage. I won't be able to watch coverage because I'll actually be playing in a Magic Grand Prix in Richmond on Saturday. It's my first one ever, so I'm pretty excited about it. But in general, I'm going to be following coverage as much as possible. Going to have my Twitch stream up, following them throughout the day. But in general, this was our regional breakdown. So this week, I'm going to be doing articles more on the Patreon, focusing around more sequencing, more looks into tournament preparation, not just the like deck building aspect, but honestly like getting yourself mentally prepared, and then just like stories to help you feel okay, because I had a lot of people reach out to me that like they played a really long day, they didn't get the result they wanted, and so like how to manage your expectations as well as manage your mental state throughout tournaments. And then in general, continue to attack this format with deck lists that are coming out. So I'll be releasing my blue yellow control SS3, I'll be releasing my blue red Hirudegarn Flute Aggro deck, and we'll just continue brewing and trying to break this format again. We've been weeks ahead through the Patreon, and I'm excited just to see where we continue to go. And otherwise, I thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching this video. Hopefully this wasn't too long. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you took something away from it that you appreciate and can take going into this week going forward. And then I'm waiting for the deck list to come out so I can do the deck list breakdown. But in general, thank you guys so much for everything you do. Thank you so much for the support. I hope you have a great week. You'll see me soon. Okay, bye!